Regret doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in quietly, often long after the moment has passed. It appears in pauses, in memories that resurface uninvited, in thoughts that begin with, "if only." Unlike fear, which points toward the future, regret pulls the mind backward. It anchors attention to moments that can no longer be changed, then asks the impossible question of what should have been done differently. Regret is not simply sadness about the past. It is a complex psychological response rooted in counterfactual thinking, the mind's ability to imagine alternative realities. This ability is essential for learning and growth. But when it turns inward and loops without resolution, it becomes one of the most emotionally consuming experiences a person can have. At its core, regret exists because humans are meaning-making creatures. We don't just experience events, we interpret them. We assign responsibility, intention, and outcome. Regret emerges when the mind concludes that a different choice would have led to a better version of the self, the future, or the present. What makes regret especially painful is that it often involves identity, not just outcome. People don't only regret what happened, they regret who they were in that moment. They judge their past selves through the lens of current awareness, forgetting that insight is always clearer in hindsight. This creates an internal imbalance. The present self becomes the judge, and the past self becomes the accused. Psychologically, regret intensifies when people feel a strong sense of agency. The more someone believes they could have acted differently, the heavier the regret becomes. This is why missed opportunities often hurt more than unavoidable losses. When fate is blamed, the mind can grieve. When the self is blamed, the mind ruminates. Regret feeds on the illusion of control. The mind replays moments, not because it expects to change the past, but because it seeks emotional resolution. It wants to understand why a choice was made, whether it reflected true values, and what it says about the person who made it. Regret becomes a way of interrogating the self. This is why regret is often accompanied by shame. Shame arises when regret is interpreted as evidence of personal deficiency, rather than situational limitation. Instead of saying, "I didn't know then what I know now," the mind says, "I should have known better." That belief is psychologically destructive. Another reason regret lingers is because the brain prioritizes unfinished narratives. When an experience ends without emotional closure, the mind keeps returning to it, trying to complete the story. Regretful moments often feel unfinished because they lack redemption. There is no corrective action available, only imagination. This is why people replay conversations, decisions, and turning points repeatedly. The mind simulates alternative outcomes in an attempt to reduce emotional tension. But each simulation reinforces awareness of loss, deepening the emotional imprint. Interestingly, regret is often stronger for inaction than action. People tend to regret things they didn't do more than things they did, even when actions had negative consequences. This is because inaction leaves more room for imagination. The path not taken remains idealized. Action creates reality. Inaction preserves fantasy. This is why people regret not speaking up, not leaving sooner, not trying harder, not choosing differently. The imagined alternative becomes emotionally exaggerated. The mind fills in gaps with hope, success, or relief. Over time, regret can become part of a person's identity. They begin to define themselves by what they missed, lost, or failed to do. Life becomes divided into before and after. This narrative gives regret power. But regret is not inherently harmful. Psychologically, regret evolved to help humans learn from mistakes. It signals misalignment between values and behavior. In its healthy form, regret encourages reflection, accountability, and future adjustment. The problem arises when regret loses its instructional role and becomes ruminative. When it stops guiding behavior and starts punishing identity, people who struggle most with regret often share certain patterns. They tend to be highly conscientious, emotionally sensitive, and self-reflective. They care deeply about meaning and consequence. Regret hits hardest when values matter. This is why telling someone to just move on never works. Regret isn't about clinging, it's about unresolved meaning. Another important factor is timing. Regret intensifies during life transitions. Aging, loss, endings, and periods of reflection all increase sensitivity to missed opportunities. When the future feels uncertain or limited, the past becomes more emotionally charged. Regret also thrives in comparison. Seeing others achieve what you once wanted activates latent regret. Not because their success harms you, but because it reminds you of unrealized possibilities. The mind doesn't ask, "Am I content?" It asks, "What could have been?" Unchecked, regret can distort perception. People begin viewing their lives through a lens of deficiency rather than continuity. They overlook resilience, adaptation, and growth. They forget that every decision was made under different emotional, informational, and psychological conditions. Regret assumes a level of foresight that never existed. And yet, despite its pain, regret reveals something important. It reveals what mattered. As regret settles into the psyche, it begins to influence how people relate to time itself. The present becomes something to endure, the future becomes something to fear, repeating, and the past becomes a constant reference point. Life feels suspended between what was and what might have been. This temporal distortion is one of regret's most damaging effects. When regret dominates, people hesitate to make new choices. They become overly cautious, fearing future regret more than missed opportunity. This creates paralysis. The very emotion meant to help guide better decisions begins preventing decisions altogether. Regret turns into risk aversion. Psychologically, this happens because the brain overestimates the emotional impact of future regret. It assumes that making a wrong choice will be unbearable, so it avoids choosing at all. But avoidance creates its own regret, one that compounds quietly over time. This is how people end up regretting entire decades, not single decisions. Another overlooked aspect of regret is its relationship with memory. Regret reshapes memory by emphasizing negative outcomes and minimizing context. The brain edits the past to fit the emotional narrative. Moments of uncertainty are remembered as foolishness. Reasonable caution is remembered as cowardice. Necessary survival choices are remembered as personal failure. This distorted memory becomes the foundation for self-criticism. What people often fail to recognize is that regret assumes stability of self across time. It judges the past self as if it had access to present insight, emotional maturity, and resources. This is psychologically unfair. The past self was operating with limited information, different pressures, and different needs. When people begin to recontextualize regret not as evidence of failure, but as evidence of growth, the emotional weight begins to shift. Growth requires contrast. Awareness requires error. Without earlier limitations, current insight would not exist. Regret, then, becomes proof of evolution. There is also a social dimension to regret. Many regrets are shaped by cultural expectations. What people believe they should have done, career paths, relationships, timelines, and milestones, all carry social pressure. Regret intensifies when people feel they failed to meet an external script. But living according to scripts often creates regret of its own. One of the most painful forms of regret is relational regret. Words unsaid, boundaries not set, love given or withheld at the wrong time. These regrets hurt because they involve emotional exposure. Relationships carry emotional permanence. Even when people move on, the emotional residue remains. Yet relational regret often ignores emotional readiness. People regret not loving better without acknowledging that they didn't yet know how. They regret staying too long or leaving too soon without recognizing the emotional constraints of the time. Regret simplifies complexity. Healing regret does not mean erasing it. It means integrating it. Integration happens when regret is allowed to inform the present without dominating it. When lessons are extracted without attaching shame, this requires compassion toward the past self. Compassion doesn't excuse mistakes, it contextualizes them. The people who suffer least from regret are not those who never made mistakes, but those who allow their identity to remain fluid. They understand that the self is always changing, that decisions are snapshots, not verdicts. When regret is reframed as information rather than condemnation, it regains its original function. It becomes guidance. Regret also diminishes when people act in alignment with current values. The more congruent someone's present life feels, the less power the past holds. Meaning in the present softens pain about the past. This is why people who feel stuck experience more regret. When life lacks forward movement, the mind turns backward. Regret is amplified by stagnation. Moving forward doesn't erase regret, but it places it in proportion. There is a final truth about regret that few people acknowledge. Regret is inseparable from caring. If you didn't care, you wouldn't regret. Regret is the emotional shadow of importance. It means something mattered. When people stop seeing regret as proof of failure and start seeing it as proof of humanity, something changes. The mind loosens its grip. The narrative softens. The past becomes a chapter instead of a sentence. The goal is not to live without regret. That's impossible for anyone who lives fully. The goal is to live without being imprisoned by it. And that freedom begins when regret stops being a punishment and becomes a teacher.